Hare Krishna. So we'll sing this song. Hey, Paru Kuruna. Hare Krishna. Baro Karuna Karo Vaishnava Goshai. E Baro Karuna Karo Vaishnava Goshai. Patita Pavana Toma Bine Kehona. Patita Pavana Toma Bine Kehona. Jahara Nikate Gele Papa Dure Jai. Jahara Nikate Gele Pape Dhure Jai. Emona Doyala Prabhu Keba Kotapai. Emona Doyala Prabhu Keba Kotapai. Gangara Parasha Hoile Pashate Pavan. Gangare Parasha Hoile Pashate Pavan. Darshane Pavitra Koro E Tomara Gun. Darshane Pavitra Koro E Tomara Gun. Haristhane Aparade Tare Harinam. Haristhane Aparade Tare Harinam. Tomasthane Aparadhe Nahi Paritran. Tomasthane Aparadhe Nahi Paritran. Tomara Hridoya Sada Govinda Vishram. Tomara Hridoya Sada Govinda Vishrama. Govinda Kohena Mora Vaishnav Paran. Govinda Kohena Mora Vaishnava Paran. Prati Janme Kori Asha tame koro doya panaraboli ebaro koruna koro Vaishnava Goshai ebaro koruna koro Vaishnava Goshai patita pavana toma bine keho nai patita pavana toma bine keho nai ebaro koruna koro Vaishnava Goshai ebaro koruna koro Vaishnava Goshai patita pavana toma bine keho nai patita pavana toma bine keho nai Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jaya Radha Natavara Radha Natavara Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Gaur Brahmanande, Hari Hari Bol. Hare Krishna. So we'll just read the translations for this song. Then we'll move on to the Srimad Bhagavatam class. O Vaishnava Goswami, please be merciful to me. There is no one except you who can purify the fallen souls. Where does anyone find such a merciful personality by whose mere audience all sins go far away? After bathing in the water of the sacred Ganga many times, one becomes purified. But just by the sight of you, the fallen souls are purified. This is your great power. The holy name delivers one who has committed an offense to Lord Hari. But if one commits an offense to you, there is no means of deliverance. Your heart is always the resting place of Lord Govinda. Lord Govinda says, the Vaishnavas are in my heart. I desire the dust of your holy feet in every birth I may take. Please consider Narottam yours and be kind upon him. Srila Narottam Das Thakur ki jai, Prarthana ki jai. Anybody have any thoughts on this song before we kind of mosey on to the Bhagavatam?
I think it's first, it's very nice, Prabhu. I just caught the last half of it. Considering how often Narottam Das Thakur was turned away by his spiritual master Loknath Goswami, that's really nice to see how much importance he places on other Vaishnavas, particularly his guru. And that line, the holy name delivers one who's committed an offense, but if one commits an offense to you, there's no means of deliverance. That's very poignant and profound.
Thank you for that. The first offense of the holy name is to blaspheme the devotees, the Vaishnavas, and that's because if you Vaishnavas are paradhuka dukhi and they do para upakar. That means they give Krishna to people. Bhaktivinoda Thakur in that song he says, you have Krishna. Oh hey Vaishnav Thakur, he says you have Krishna. Vaishnavas have Krishna, and they can only give it to other people. But if we're blaspheming Vaishnavas, we're not appreciating Krishna's instruments. So if I take your glasses and I break them, and people won't be very happy with me. So it's a very odd thing. So if you're saying I'm trying to please you, but I'm breaking your glasses, or you're breaking your own part of your own body, and Krishna is saying your heart is always the resting place of Lord Govinda. Krishna is always in the Vaishnava's heart. So if we're making offenses and if we're blaspheming them, then it's actually we're not understanding the true aspect of Krishna consciousness, which is pleasing Krishna. We're putting our false ego first, per se. That's what I've been listening to this seminar by Amarendra Prabhu. It's actually an old seminar. Not many people have heard of it. It's called The Holy Name, the 10 Offenses and the 10 Defenses. He gave this in Dallas, 2015. It's on ISKCON Desire Tree. It's not on YouTube. And he's breaking down why have we ever thought, when we're chanting, why is offending the Vaishnavas first? Why is that the first offense? That's because they're Krishna's instruments, and we're not. If we can't reciprocate with them, then what chance do we have with Krishna, right? Does anybody else have any other thoughts on that, on this song, or anything that was said previously?
Yeah, multiple times, Hare Krishna, everybody. Multiple times throughout the Shastras, they always mention that that you're not directly a servant of Krishna, but you're a servant of the servant of Krishna. And I think this verse speaks to the importance of Vaishnavas, of respecting Vaishnavas, because they show the very large potential of Vaishnavas, like purifying all the fallen souls just by one sight. But like it also shows like the huge risk, huge reward. Like if we commit an offense to them, we're not going to be delivered. But if we don't and we get their association in the proper way, then we are delivered. So it requires, it lets us know that we have to associate with Vaishnavas. We have to be very careful that we don't commit offenses.
Yeah, Vaishnav etiquette is actually quite important, because Vaishnav etiquette is actually the jewel of the devotee. It stays in the devotee's heart, and what that does, it's kind of like a fence that guards your bhakti lata beach. So when we act according to Vaishnav etiquette, then our seed can grow properly. But if there's no fence, an elephant might come and trample it, and that is Vaishnava Aparadh. Mad elephant will come and run over the garden. So yeah, high risk, high reward. So you're going to get big reward by associating with the Vaishnavas, but you have to stay on your toes. Gauranga Prabhu was saying once that Krishna consciousness is like a razor's edge. A razor's edge does the job in shaving, but if you're not careful, blood will come. So we have to be very on our toes. We can't be off our toes anytime. It's not that we're Vaishnavas in the temple and Asuras at home. We have to be on our toes all the time. Anything else? It's actually a very, very nice song. This line is quoted so much in Chaitanya Charitamrita and in so many places. Tomar hridoye sada Govinda Vishram. That your heart is always the resting place of Lord Govinda. And then Govinda says, Govinda kohena more Vaishnava paran. That the Vaishnavas are in my heart. So it's a reciprocal relationship. Okay. Acha. So we will move on to the Srimad Bhagavatam class by Rahul Prabhu. Rahul Prabhu, what to say about Rahul Prabhu? Rahul Prabhu is a young, dynamic, and very enthusiastic Vaishnava, and I always relish getting his association in the temple. And he likes hearing, he likes reading, he likes chanting, and most of all, he likes to serve. And he's in high school, but he has studied the Shastras actually quite deeply, more than a lot of devotees. But we are very glad to have him speak on the Srimad Bhagavatam. It's actually purifying for him, and the Bhagavatam is so pure, it's purifying for him, and it's purifying for us also. So it's a win-win situation. Nobody loses. So actually, he'll be starting the new chapter, Canto 1, Chapter 11. We're making fast progress, and he'll be speaking on the first 6 verses. It's about 8:05. Prabhu will speak for about 45 minutes to 1 hour, and then after that there will be question, answers, discussions, rebuttals, because Rahul's on the debate team. You can rebuttal him. So Rahul Prabhu, please go ahead. You can take it on from here. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Hari. Thank you so much for the kind words. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to serve today. Let's start with Mangalacharan, and then we can start with the verses. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Mulitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Novishtam Stapitam Yena Rupaye Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Pada Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bhando Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sutta Devi Tude Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vansha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesha Sunyavadi Paschata Deshatarine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityanandana Shri Advaita Gadadara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Okay, so with that complete, we can start with the discussion. So as Hari mentioned, we'll be discussing the first 6 verses of the 11th chapter of the first canto. So we are moving away from like Mahabharata, the scene of the Mahabharata. So the first couple chapters were about like the introduction to the Bhagavatam. And then after that, we discussed some pastimes about Ashwatthama, and we discussed some pastimes about Kunti and Bhishma. So it was somewhat in the aftermath of the Mahabharata. And now Krishna is coming back to Dwarka. So today we'll focus mainly on Krishna coming back to Dwarka and the residents of Dwarka, the Dwarkavasis, initial reaction to Krishna coming back. So today, the first 5 verses will be spoken by Srila Goswami, and the last verse is the start of prayer spoken by the Dwarkavasis. So I think that's a pretty good roadmap for us to start. So I'll recite the first verse. Sutta uvacha anartan sa upavrajya svidan janapadan svakan tadmodaravaram tesham vishadam samayaniva. And the translation, I'll just read the paragraph translation. So the Goswami said, upon reaching the border of his most prosperous metropolis, known as the country of the Anarthas, Dwarka, the Lord sounded his auspicious conch shell, heralding his arrival and apparently pacifying the dejection of its inhabitants. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. The beloved Lord was away from his own prosperous metropolis of Dwarka for a considerably long period because of the battle of Kurukshetra, and thus all the inhabitants were overcome with a melancholia due to separation. When the Lord descends to the earth, his eternal associates also come with him, just as the entourage of a king accompanies him. Such associates of the Lord are eternally liberated souls, and they cannot bear the separation for the Lord, even for a moment, because of a tense affection for the Lord. Thus, the inhabitants of the city of Dwarka were in a mood of dejection and expected the arrival of the Lord at any minute. So the heralding sound of the auspicious conch shell was very encouraging, and apparently the sound pacified their dejection. They were still more aspirant to see the Lord amongst themselves, and all of them became alert to receive him in a benefiting manner. These are the signs of the spontaneous love of Godhead. So this verse discusses Krishna entering the city of Dwarka, and he's sounding his conch shell, and now this verse specifically describes that the Dwarkavasis initially get really excited because they have missed Krishna for a long time. They have Vipralamba Raga, like all the gopis did in Vrindavan to some extent, and they had that because they love Krishna all the time, and they had that sincere desire to have the association of Krishna, and now that they've been deprived of it for such a long time, and they're finally getting it, they're very excited. It'll describe in later verses how they run really quickly towards Krishna and all those things. But for now, let's focus on just the context and the purport of this verse. So first, it says the Lord is away from Dwarka, and his inhabitants were overcome with like sadness due to separation. So this rag is called Vipralamba, and it's a very, very powerful emotion. There's this one story where, I don't know where exactly it's from, but it says there's like a Brahmana on the road, and there's this woman who just runs and past the Brahmana. I think she kicks the Brahmana, and the Brahmana gets confused when she comes back. And when she's coming back, the Brahmana asks, why did you kick me? And she said, I was so inspired to see, I was so determined to see someone who I hadn't seen for such a long time. And because of that, I didn't remember anything else around me. And that's what Vipralanga Rag does. The gopis, even though they were doing their own like the duties, like washing clothes, like cooking, all those things, they were still thinking of Krishna at every moment because of separation, when he was either out in the forest during the day or when he was gone in Mathura. So this is this feeling of Vipralanga Rag. In fact, sometimes it's said that Vipralamba is actually more powerful than togetherness. So separation is more powerful than togetherness. And the reason that is because in separation, you're always thinking about when Krishna's going to come. And in togetherness, you're always thinking when Krishna's going to leave because you're so anxious about that. And actually, at the end of the 10th canto, the queens of Dwarka make a prayer where they ask all the birds in the near city, oh, are you anxious that Krishna might be leaving today? Do you think Krishna is going to leave today? I don't want that to happen. I don't know what will happen to me. And that's described because you have so much anxiety that when Krishna's going to leave, you're only thinking about that. But when you're in separation, you're always thinking about when Krishna's going to come, and that makes you happy. So sometimes it's actually said that separation actually increases your love towards Krishna. And one more point that I'll make about this. I heard in class from Amarendra Prabhu that both separation and togetherness are very important in the development of love of bhakti. Just like when you're sawing a piece of wood, you saw forward and then you saw backwards, and you saw forward and then backwards. You're not just sawing forward or just sawing backwards. Forward may be like togetherness, and backward may be like separation. So both of them help you cut the wood easier. So both love in separation and love in togetherness do increase your pure devotional service and increase your love for Krishna. And so the next point Srila Prabhupada makes in the purport is that when the Lord comes, his entourage comes as well, because all of these associates of the Lord are eternally liberated. They're nityasiddhas, and they cannot bear separation from the Lord, and they're so sad. But when Krishna does come, they're happy. So the point here is made is that all of the Dwarkavasis were eternally liberated because they're devotees of the Lord. And because they're devotees, they're always with Krishna. Srila Prabhupada will describe in a couple of purports later that technically these devotees are actually never factually separated because they're always thinking of Krishna. So there's no real separation going on. But because there's some apparent separation going on, so now the inhabitants of Dwarka are finally meeting their master, and that's why they're much happier. And one more point, there's a couple of points that'll move into the next verses. Number one is the conch shell. In the next verse, we'll discuss the conch shell. And then in the third verse, we'll discuss the sound pacifying the dejection and the importance of sound in the process of bhakti. But before we go into that, there's this last sentence in the purport where it says, these are the signs of spontaneous love of Godhead. That brings into the question, like, what is spontaneous love versus regulative love? In Srila Rupa Goswami's Nectar of Devotion, Rupa Goswami bifurcates the two types of devotional service, the Vaidhi Bhakti and Raganuga Bhakti. Vaidhi Bhakti is when you're doing devotional service, not because you technically have the attraction to. You might have some attraction, but it's not enough. It's not a lot of attraction. But you're doing devotional service because your guru is telling you to. Your guru is instructing you to do devotional service. You're following the regular principles. So you might be waking up early. You might have to set an alarm clock because you're not that eager to wake up early. But either way, you want to wake up and you have some desire, but mainly it's driven by the fact that your guru is instructing. So it's by the rules and regulations. However, in the other form of bhakti, Raganuga Bhakti, Rupa Goswami clearly states that this is not anymore because you have to do it. It's because you want to do it. There was no one telling these Dwarkavasis, oh, Krishna's there, go and run quickly. They were doing it on their own will because they're that attracted to Krishna. I was listening to a lecture by Radheshyam Prabhu a couple of days ago, and he says that of everything, of like attachment, attention, affection, attraction comes first. Because whatever your mind is attracted to, that's where your mind will go. So if your mind is attracted to something else and you're trying to chant japa, you aren't going to be attentive because you need to be attracted to Krishna. So because their attraction is the Dwarkavasis attraction is so strong for Krishna, they're willing to do anything just to get Krishna. And they're going to run towards him, as we're going to see in the next couple of verses, because of their spontaneous love of Godhead. So the effects of separation and the willingness to go, not because they have to go, because they want to go, that's the signs of spontaneous love of Godhead that are here. So with that said, let's move on to the second verse. So Uchakase dabalao daro purukramasya darasona sonima tad mayamana karakanja sampute yatabja kande kalahamsa utsvana. Translation: the white and fat belled conch shell being gripped by the hand of the Lord of Lord Krishna and sounded by him appeared to be reddened by the touch of his transcendental lips. It seemed that a white swan was playing in the stems of red lotus flowers. Purport: The redness of the white conch shell to the lip touch of the Lord is a symbol of spiritual significance. The Lord is all spirit, and matter is ignorance of this spiritual existence. Factually, there is nothing like matter in spiritual enlightenment, and this spiritual enlightenment takes place at once by the contact of the Supreme Lord Sri Krishna. The Lord is present in every particle of existence, and he can manifest his presence in anyone. By ardent love and devotional service to the Lord, or in other words, by spiritual contact with the Lord, everything becomes spiritually reddened by the conch shell, like the conch shell of the Griffin Lord. And the Paramahamsa, or the supremely intelligent person, plays the part of the ducking swan in the water of spiritual bliss, eternally decorated by the lotus flower of the Lord's feet. So this is a beautiful verse. It describes Krishna's coming in, him blowing the conch. But there's also two important analogies in this verse. The first one is the analogy of the conch, which isn't exactly in the verse, but Prabhupada has written in the purport. And the second one is the analogy of the swan going into the reddish lotus stems. So let's first talk about the first analogy, the redness of the white conch shell. So Prabhupada writes in the purport that the Lord is all spirit and matter is all ignorance. So the matter is the absence of the Lord. And there's nothing like matter in spiritual enlightenment. And that spiritual enlightenment happens when you're in contact with the Lord. I remember in 6th grade, we were having a science class. Somebody asked the teacher, what is the speed of darkness? And she said, there's no such thing as darkness. Darkness is just the absence of light. And that's kind of how this can be summed up in. There is matter, like there's a material world, but it's based on the fact that Krishna isn't present. So the material world is, we have the material world and it's going to be there, but our material like consciousness is only because Krishna isn't present. So once Krishna comes, then the material world is, then the material life and the ignorance with it is finished. On every Back to Godhead magazine, Prabhupada writes at the very top, I don't know exactly remember the exact saying, so Hadi, you can correct me on this. I believe it's Godhead is light, nescience is darkness. Where there is light, there cannot be any darkness. Is that right? Yeah. So what he's saying there is whenever there's Krishna, there can't be any darkness. There cannot be any ignorance, there cannot be any other things. And eventually it'll all go away. In Rupa Goswami's Upadeshamrita, the Nectar of Instruction, verse 7, Rupa Goswami writes that initially when chanting, there might be some avidya, there might be some ignorance, but eventually when Krishna comes on your tongue more and more, that avidya will be destroyed at the root. So it's clear that when we're fully accepting Krishna, there's no way we're going to be able to maintain ignorance here as well. So that is also there. And Prabhupada may describe sometimes that devotees are maybe interested in making money. Like there's a lot of examples of really rich devotees, like Advaita Acharya is like described to have so many, like a large house, lots of cows, but that's not because they were materially attached. What's his name? Pundarika Vidyanidhi was also described to have a lot of wealth. That doesn't mean they were materially attached. That means that they're using their wealth to serve Krishna. Now that has to be done on a case-by-case basis. And we can't just like say like whatever we use, like we use for Krishna, because then we can get into like abusing that and actually like sense gratifying. But it's clear that a pure devotee who has no material desires will use everything in the service of Krishna. And that's part of the spiritual reddening of the material conch, where all of our entire material life is now spiritually reddened because we're using it for the service of Krishna. So the second analogy, that's the first one about the conch. And the second analogy is in the actual translation itself, the last line, it says that it seems that a white swan was playing in the stems of the red lotus flowers. In this verse, the word for swan is Kalahamsa. And that's close to another word we might know, Paramahamsa. And actually the word hamsa does mean swan. And I've heard Amarendra Prabhu say that there's a couple of similarities between Paramahamsas and swans. One example is that swans, if you give them a mixture of milk and water, they will only take the milk out and they'll leave the water somehow. And just like that, saintly devotees, Paramahamsas, will look at a person, only accept their good qualities and ignore their bad qualities. The same way that it's used as an analogy in the Shastra. So there's a lot of descriptions of Paramahamsas getting into the bliss of the Lord. And that's what he's saying. If we are Paramahamsas, if we're pure, then we can actually get spiritual bliss. The last line of the purport is, and the Paramahamsa, or the supremely intelligent person, plays the part of the ducking swan in this water of the spiritual bliss, eternally decorated by the lotus flower of the Lord's feet. And it's not saying spiritual, like spiritual bliss is the word here, because spiritual life is happiness. Prabhupada said, chant and be happy. And in the first verses of Shikshashtakam, Anandham Buddhivardhanam is the fifth quality, I believe, of chanting the holy name. There's 7 qualities, I believe, in that verse. And the fifth one, in the third line, is Anandham Buddhivardhanam, an ocean of increasing happiness because of chanting the holy name of the Lord. That is by being a supremely intelligent person, by being a Paramahamsa, through the process of bhakti, we can play the part of a swan in the water, as in we can also engage in this significant spiritual bliss that they're experiencing right now. So if we follow the process of bhakti, if we follow those through, then we also can engage in this ocean of spiritual bliss. So those were the 2 analogies provided in this purport. And now we can move on to the third verse. The third verse has a purport which is 4 paragraphs. So I think for the sake of time, we're not going to read it, everything. The other verses are other purports are a little bit shorter, so we might have time to read them. But for this one, we will just go through the bigger picture, and I'll point to where Prabhupada talks to them and what paragraphs of the purport. And if I want to say something specifically in the purport, we'll quote something there. So let's get started. Verse 3. Tam upashrutya nidadam jagat phaya bhayavaham pratyudyo yayu prajasarva brate darshana lalasa. The translation is, the citizens of Dwarka, having heard that sound which threatens fear personified in the material world, began to run towards him fast, just to have a long-desired audience with the Lord, who is the protector of all devotees. So we'll break this up into we'll break the purport into a couple sections. The first 2 paragraphs talks about expands on separation bhav and talks about the citizens of Dwarka itself. And then the last 2 paragraphs talks about the sound of the Lord. So we'll first discuss the first 2 paragraphs, where Prabhupada talks about how all of these Dwarkavasis were like liberated souls, and they're all so anxious to have audience with the Lord because of spiritual contact, but because of spiritual contact, they were never separated. As we've mentioned previously, the gopis in Vrindavan used to think of Krishna all the time, when they were cooking, when they were cleaning, all of those things. And for that reason, there was no separation that they felt, because there was some separation, but they were technically not separated because they were thinking of him all the time. In the 3rd canto, there's the 3rd canto starts the discussion of Maitreya and Vidura, but in the earlier chapters, the discussion doesn't start on chapter 1. The discussion starts like chapter 6, chapter 7. But the first few chapters are actually Uddhava and Vidura talking, because Vidura has been kicked out of he's been insulted by Duryodhana, so he leaves and he goes out and he meets Uddhava, and Uddhava is really upset because the Lord has just left and the Lord has returned to his own abode. So Uddhava is a pure devotee. He's very attached to the Lord, and he is now sad that he's not going to be able to see his association on the planet Earth anymore. And he describes all of the Lord's pastimes, but towards the end of the conversation with Uddhava and Vidura, right before Uddhava directs Vidura to go find Maitreya Muni and start that conversation, Uddhava says that instead of going along with the Lord, Uddhava is going to Badarikashrama. I believe that's near the Himalayas. And the reason why he's doing that is because the Lord ordered him to. So he's not going to, he could have decided to go liberate. He was a pure devotee. However, he decided to stay on the planet Earth, go to Badarikashrama because the Lord told him to, because the Lord wanted other conditioned souls to be delivered as well. So Uddhava can stay there and people would come and visit and he can speak to them and they might get delivered. So Prabhupada makes the point in the purport of those verses that following the Lord's order is just as good as associating with the Lord himself. So if we are preaching, because we're following Lord Chaitanya's order to spread the holy name in every town and village, that's associating with the Lord. If we are following the order of the Lord, it's essentially association with Krishna, because Krishna is not, because he's telling us to do something and we're listening to it. That's also service. Service is executing the will of the Lord. So if we are following the will of the Lord by we're following his order, then that's association and service. So that's another way that we can also associate with the Lord. That's by following the Lord's order. And it also discusses that the citizens of Dwarka were anxious to have the audience of the Lord. And this feeling of anxiety is also described in the Shikshashtakam, in the 7th verse. Yugayitam nimeshena chakshusha pravarshayitam sunyayitam jagat sarvam govinda virhename. Where Lord Chaitanya describes animesha, just a second of time, is feeling like a yuga, like such a long time. Why? He says at the end of the verse, it's because Govinda Virhename, in separation of Krishna. So that's how anxious he is. I believe actually the gopis have a similar sentiment. How is that right? The gopis have a similar sentiment in the Gopi Gita. There's a verse where they describe like whenever he's not here, we feel like one like minute is like a really long time, and then if he is here, a really long time feels like a minute.
They're cursing Brahma, right? That
Yeah.
Why do you make these eyelids? Because I don't even want to blink. Because one blink is I can't see Krishna. So even 1 second they're like, we can't even look away from Krishna. So they're cursing Brahma. They're like, why'd you create us with eyelids? That's their mood.
Yeah. The gopis have so much bhav for Krishna. They're cursing Brahma because they're saying, oh, when I close my eyes, that's a blink. And now I can't see Krishna. So it's the same. It's some of the same mood where they're all anxious to see Krishna, and the short periods of time feel like a long period of time, and the long periods of time with Krishna feel like short periods of time. So, continuing on, the main points of these first 2 paragraphs is the idea of separation. We've already discussed a little bit about it, and Prabhupada gives another analogy that we are not happy when the sun is not out because we are all like gloomy and depressed. No one is like, I love darkness, we should just always like not have a sun. People are not incredibly excited on rainy days because we don't have like the sun. However, when Krishna comes, then we can actually be happy. Prabhupada says that the whole point of devotional service is to get happiness. The whole point of bhakti is to get happiness, and we are all trying to get happiness. We're all the whole point of devotional service is to serve the Lord, but as jivas, we're all anandamayi. We're all looking for Krishna. And looking for happiness. But we cannot get happiness without Krishna. We say Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Rama means the reservoir of all pleasure. And people who we are in the material world looking for pleasure without the reservoir of all pleasure. And that's part of the reason why Prabhupada compares Krishna to the sun. Because when you're trying to find pleasure, when you're trying to find light without the sun, it's not going to work. I mean, we have like artificial lights and stuff like that, but there's not a lot of light without the sun. And the same way, there's not happiness without Krishna. So pure devotional service is all for serving Krishna, and all of us are looking for happiness, which is found only in Krishna. So let's continue on. That's the first 2 paragraphs. And the second 2 paragraphs, the third paragraph in this broken into a couple of sections, talks about the sound form of the Lord, where it describes that the sound threatens fear personified in the material world. And like we've heard this multiple times, the Prabhupada says the Lord's name, paraphernalia, activities, lila, etc., are all equal to the Lord. And they're all non-different from the Lord. And Bhuta Bhavana Prabhu made this point a couple of weeks ago when he was here, that we need to actually realize that. Because if we realized that Krishna was non-different from his holy name, we wouldn't be attentive in our japa or in our service. When we were reading, if we're reading, we might be like a little bit of inattentive. But if we realize that Krishna is the same as his glories, he's not different from his glories, we wouldn't be as inattentive. Because if Krishna came in front of us, we would definitely like not be inattentive. We would all be very focused. So we should have that same mentality when we're chanting japa or doing any devotional activity like reading, hearing, anything, because those glories, the glories and the holy name and all of that are non-different from Krishna. So if we engage in those activities as well, then we should be very attentive because they're non-different from Krishna, because we should treat it the same way as if Krishna was in front of us. And then Prabhupada describes some of the problems in this material world. There's 4 problems about food, shelter, fear, and mating. But Prabhupada says that of all the 4, fear is the most prominent. And the reason why, I see the points that are made here. Yeah, if we had faith that Krishna is in Prasad, we would not have meetings or talk Prajalta while honoring Prasad. We would be talking about Krishna consciousness topics about Krishna, because when we have that realization, we understand it fully, and then that realization turns into action. So thank you for that point. So then Prabhupada describes those 4 problems, and he says that of the 4, of food, shelter, fear, and mating, the worst one is fear. I don't know if it's a quote by someone famous or just a saying, but there's there's this saying, this is the biggest fear is fear itself. I think that might have actually been FDR, I'm not sure. But that's kind of like the idea that's described here, because we're scared because we don't know what's coming next. We don't know if we're going to have a food problem, a shelter problem, a fear problem, a mating problem. We don't know which problems we're going to have, or other problems that are like subcategories of those problems. We don't know which ones are going to come tomorrow. And because of that, we're scared. So the fear is amplifying itself. However, so we have this big issue of fear. We see even now that countries take preemptive actions of war because they're scared of something. If someone is scared of like a war, if one country is scared of a war, they might preemptively strike, and that'll actually lead to a war. So the fear we see here in the material world is a huge issue, and it's causing a lot of suffering for us. So what's the solution to this? Well, Prabhupada says that the solution is to chant Hare Krishna and get to Krishna consciousness. In the Namamrita, Prabhupada finds that chanting the holy name can control the mind and prevent it from getting attacked by the anarthas. He says that the anarthas are trying to attack our mind, like the lust, anger, greed, and fear is considered an anartha. And if we chant the holy name, then it's protecting our mind from those anarthas attacking us. There's also, I was listening to a class by Radha Prabhu a couple weeks ago, where he was describing this devotee who was coming to Pune. They were very sincere, but there was a family of 3, the mom, dad, and the son. And the mom always would be really scared coming to the temple. And Radha Prabhu asked her why. And she said that we come to temple on a motorcycle. Because of that, there's a dog that always chases me behind us. And I get scared of that dog. And then 2 years later, the family is still in Krishna consciousness. They're very successful. And now they have a car. And this Mataji tells Radha Prabhu, I'm not as scared anymore because I'm sitting in a car, which is protecting me from the dog. And Radha Prabhu, because he's a pure devotee, he can see everything in relationship to Krishna. He says that is a sign of like that's similar to how we can deal with our anarthas. That if we're not in a film of Krishna consciousness, if we're not protected by anything, if we're just open, the anarthas will come and attack us. However, when we have a car, or the car like is Krishna consciousness, when we have that Krishna consciousness, when we have that, like when we're chanting the holy name, we're protected from the anarthas. The anartha may be still there, like there might still be like lusty influences or anything, like lusty influences or something. Like it's described that like Sukadev Goswami, like there was some like that he was able to walk by people who are bathing and not get lusty or anything like that. There may be like the lusty influence, but it's not attacking the mind because you're pure of it and you're covered from it and you're taking shelter of Krishna consciousness. So that's part of the descriptions of just dealing with the anarthas as a whole, but including fear. That if we're chanting the holy name and we're getting into Krishna consciousness, that means we're going to be free of fear. Like Srila Prabhupada's full name is A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Abhay Charananda Vinda, free of fear. And Prabhupada asks multiple times, what is like the meaning of Krishna consciousness? And he will every now and say, I feel free of fear. And so like that's because he knows that Krishna is going to protect him in any circumstance, and he doesn't have the fear attacking him all the time because he's chanted the holy name, because he's in Krishna consciousness. So if we also chant the holy name and we also get into Krishna consciousness, then we can protect us from fear. Sorry. Okay. So that I think that concludes the discussion on that verse. So we'll move on to text 4 and 5. Tatro panita balayo ravedi pamivadrita atmaramam purnakamam nijalabhena nityatha Pityutphula mukha prochur harsha gadgad dayagira pitaram sarvasuratham avitaram ivarbaka. When I was reading this verse first, I noticed the first word gadgadaya, which is mentioned also in Shishashtakam 6. Nayanam galad ashudalaya vadanam gadgada rudhayakira pulakarnichitam vapukkalata namagrahane bhavishyati. So that can show that that verse describes the ecstatic symptoms. And Prabhupada says in this purport that the Dvarkavasis are also having ecstatic symptoms. And they're also speaking in
Gadgad is actually an onomatopoeia. Gadgad is kind of like choking. You're kind of like stammering. You're like gadgad. You're like it's like you're trying to speak something, but then it's also like it's kind of like choked up. I heard that in a seminar once.
So when you're like, because you can't speak, and like when you're trying to speak and you can't speak, it sounds like gadgad. So it's an onomatopoeia, and it describes like, I think that verse, like that word specifically, I'm not 100% sure. It's like ecstatic language or like choking up. Okay.
So chokes up with tears. Yeah.
Yeah. So like that's like gadgadaya is like ecstatic in this verse. So these verses will discuss the ecstatic love of the Dvarkavasis. And the translation is: the citizens arrived before the Lord with their respective presentations, offering them to the fully satisfied and self-sufficient one, who by his own potency incessantly supplies others. These presentations were like the offering of a lamp to the sun. Yet the citizens began to speak in ecstatic language to receive the Lord, just as wards welcome their guardian and father. The purport is 2 paragraphs for this one. I think we can also just break this one up. The purport does have a lot, but for the sake of time, I think we're gonna just talk a little bit less about the purport, and we'll just summarize it. But everyone, if you have time, please go read the purport. Before that, though, we'll look at the translation, and it says that they're all offering the Lord presentations to the fully satisfied and self-sufficient one, who supplies everything to him. And that these presentations are like offering a lamp to the sun. So the lamp, the sun does not need our light. The sun does not need our little lamp that we give to the sun. And like I think Radhika Raman Prabhu made this point, that we also offer water to the Ganga. Well, before we bathe, we take Ganga water and we take it in. But it's not like the Ganga needs our water that we took from her. It's not like we're taking it away now. Ganga is indebted to us because we took her water and gave it back to her. It's a sign of respect. And as Krishna is like Atmarama, he's self-sufficient. He doesn't need to seek happiness from everything else. There's a verse in the Padyavali. That when Arjun Sakha Prabhu came, he said, Vyadyasya charanam dhruvasya chavaya vidya gajendrasya ka kubjaya kimunama rupam adhikam kim tatsudam nodanam vamsha kim vidurasya yadavapate ugrasya ka paurusha bhaktim tushati kevalam nachaguner bhakti priyo madhava. And that verse is very beautiful. It describes that Dhruva Maharaj had no age, and Gajendra had no intelligence. He was an elephant. And Kubja didn't have a lot of beauty. And Sudama didn't have a lot of wealth. And Vidura wasn't born in a higher caste, or had a higher birth. He was son of a Dasi. He was a Dasi Putra. And then Ugrasena was imprisoned. He wasn't like strong and firm. But regardless of all of those, they still pleased Krishna. And the last line is Bhaktin tushtati kevalam nachaguner bhakti priyo madhava. Only bhakti pleases the Lord, because no material qualification can. Because let's face it, why are we having all this intelligence? Why do we have all these things? We didn't come up with them or create them. It's because Krishna created them in the first place. Krishna created them and he's giving it to us. And he can do everything 10 times better than we can. It's described that Krishna is smarter than all the demons. Krishna is smarter than everybody else. So if we're offering our minute like wealth or whatever, when Krishna is the full of wealth, it's not going to please him unless it's done in pure devotion. And we'll discuss a little bit of that like a little bit later. But yeah, the purport describes that Krishna is independent. He's self-sufficient. Everything runs on him, and we are dependent on him. But so he doesn't actually need anything. But still, because he's the well-wisher for one and all, he accepts from everyone everything that is offered to him in pure devotional service. Bhagavad Gita 9.26 and 27. Prabhupada, Krishna says that whatever that if a leaf, fruit, flower, or water is offered to him in pure devotional service and in the mood of love and devotion, he'll accept it. And like it's obvious that Krishna doesn't need our leaves or flowers, but the reason he's accepting it is through love and devotion. I don't remember what speaker this was, but I remember in a Sravanam Saturday, like a lot earlier, there was this discussion about the two verses side by side. Because in the 27th verse, Yad Karoshi Yadashnasi, Krishna says, whatever you do, whatever you like offer in charity, whatever you do it for me. But he doesn't outright specifically say that he'll accept it. And the speaker made the claim, said that Krishna accepts things only in pure love and devotion, not because, not for the material gain. Because obviously Krishna doesn't need this material thing. He is like he's the source of everything. He's the cause of all causes. So everything is technically his. We are taking it and then giving it back to him. But it's not what we're giving, it's the intent by which we're giving it. That's pure love and devotion, and that's what Krishna is accepting. Yes. Atmanamas chamunayo. Yeah, so that's part of the self-satisfied verse. I think in this case, like in that verse, like the word self-satisfied refers to like devotees. There's like 61 explanations of that verse. Is it 61 or 62? 61 explanation of that verse. It's 1.7.10. It's a really, really beautiful verse. And the Chaitanya Charitamrita, I think Madhya Lila 24, that verse is described in 61 explanations by the Lord. So it's a wonderful verse. So continuing on, then throughout the purport, Prabhupada says that there's either in like the worship of the sun, there's a demand made by the worshiper. But in the case of devotional service to the Lord, there's no demand on either side. So bhakti is unmotivated on both sides. Because the Lord, he doesn't need any of our like service. Like if we give it to him, it's for our own benefit. He doesn't need if I'm offering to him like an object or a flower, he's not going to be panic or whatever. I don't give him a flower from my garden. He doesn't need that. But a pure devotee also has no material desires. They're not requesting anything from the Lord. I was listening to lecture by Radhanath Maharaj, and he was saying that the word that it's used is samsiddhir hari toshanam, and it's interesting that you use the word hari because hari is usually means used in like stealing, like chitta hari, or like vastra hari, like stealing inauspiciousness, stealing hearts. So like he's like I use this like a thief almost. It's in that sense. But like the general thing is we're satisfying the one who always takes from us. Sometimes we want, in the material world, we try to satisfy people who give to us. So we'll satisfy like a president because we know that they're going to give us money, or satisfy a rich person because we know they're going to give us money. But when it comes to pure devotional service, we are satisfying someone who's going to take from us, because if we are pure devotees, we'll have no material desires, and Krishna can take whatever he wants. We just want to keep giving and giving to him. That's what pure devotional service is: having no material desires and only wanting to serve the Lord. And that's the pure love and the pure affection. That's what's driving bhakti. It's not motivated by material desires. It's like ahaituki apratihata yatatma suprasidati. Bhakti is not motivated by anything material. It is just pure love and affection. It's just unmotivated, just the desire to serve Krishna. The love and the affection is leading to the desire to serve Krishna, and that's all that is driving this process. So that's first paragraph. And the second paragraph of the purport, Prabhupada discusses about how the Lord can fulfill all the desires of the devotees. He can give someone, if we're conscious of our relationship with Krishna, then Krishna will supply demands of the obedient sons. And he's a desire tree. From him, everyone can have everything. But then Prabhupada makes the point that the pure devotees are desireless. At the end of the second chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, towards the end, Krishna goes through a very logical line that we cannot have happiness if we have desires, because desires are needs and those needs cause anxiety. So when we have no desires, then we'll actually be happy. So we see that because pure devotees are happy, they have no material desires. They only want to serve the Lord. But even if we do have a material desire, sometimes like the Lord might fulfill it, but sometimes, like Prabhupada says in the purport, I'll quote it here, as Supreme Father, the Lord, however, does not supply to a pure devotee what is considered to be a barrier of the discharge of devotional service. So the Lord will not give us anything that will make it harder to practice bhakti. The verses before Vritrasura's prayer. So Vritrasura in the 6th canto, 11th chapter, he starts speaking when Indra is about to kill him. He like curses in there, oh my God, you killed a Brahmana, and now you're trying to kill me. And then his mood suddenly changed, said, if you kill me, that's okay, because Vishnu is on your side. And the last one or two verses before Vritrasura turns to his 4 prayers to Krishna, he says that the Lord can provide a benediction to devotees. But if that devotee is making spiritual progress, the Lord does not provide the benediction. And the natural question is why? And I'll read the quotation from that. His possessions naturally increase in his enmity, anxiety, mental agitation, pride, and belligerence. Thus, one goes through much endeavor to increase and maintain his possessions, and he suffers great unhappiness when he loses them. Because when we have those, like when we get something that we want, we start to get attached to it. And if we're attached to something material, it's less likely we're attached to something spiritual, like Krishna. Because when we get those things, we're going to be realizing, oh, I need to keep it. Oh, other people might get it. I want to be like envious of them. Oh, if it's lost, it's a lot of unhappiness, and all those things take us away from Krishna. So we may have those material desires, but if they're not being fulfilled, it might be because Krishna wants you to go towards him, and that whatever is happening to you is for your benefit. I think Ritadvija Maharaj says a lot. Krishna is in charge and he never makes mistakes. And he's the well-wisher of all devotees. So he's the one doing everything. He's not going to make any mistakes in doing it. And he's the well-wisher of devotees. So he knows what's best for you. And he's going to place exactly what is best for you. And he's going to make the circumstances so that can happen. And we all know that, we know theoretically that the best thing for us is to engage in the process of devotional service. And Krishna knows that that's best for us too. And he's going to put us in circumstances where that is the best for us. That's why sometimes, I think Prabhupada makes in a couple of purports that sometimes like Vaishnavas are not the richest or not the most well-to-do. They have some poverty to them. And Prabhupada explains that sometimes it's because Krishna knows that those devotees can handle it. And that those devotees if they were in poverty, then they're not materially so attached. They can be attached to Krishna, the biggest opulence gainer, the one of the richest of all, and then they can continue their spiritual life very nicely from there and become a servant of Krishna. So that's why sometimes Krishna will not give us a desire that we have, because he knows that the desire will hurt our devotional service. And then Prabhupada ends the purport by saying, those who are engaged in the devotional service of the Lord can rise to the position of unalloyed devotional service by its transcendental attraction. So unalloyed refers to like pure, the Kevala Bhakti, not mixed with jnana or karma. Like the word alloy is like two metals coming together. But so unalloyed bhakti is there's nothing with bhakti. It's just bhakti. And if we're starting to practice devotional service, then we can get attracted to the Lord, because we're attached only to Krishna, because the Lord is not supplying us, because we're not getting things that would take us away from him. And we continue doing that, and we can rise to the position of unalloyed bhakti. So by that attraction, we can start engaging in devotional service. So now we will discuss the last verse. We'll move on to the 6th verse. I know we're I do have until 9, Hari, or should I end a little bit earlier? 9? Okay. So we have around 10 minutes left, and we can go through this verse quickly. Natasvatena tasadangri pankajam virincha vairincha surendra vanditam parayanam shemami hechatam param nayatra kala prabhavet para prabhu. The citizen said, or the translation, the citizen said, O Lord, you are worshipped by all the demigods like Brahma, the four sanas, and even the king of heaven. You are the ultimate rest for those who are really aspiring to achieve the highest benefit of life. You are the supreme transcendental Lord, and inevitable time cannot exert its influence upon you. So I'll read the purport because it's short. The Supreme Lord is Sri Krishna as confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita, Brahma Samhita, and other authorized Vedic literatures. No one is equal to or greater than him, and that is the verdict of all scriptures. The influence of time and space is exerted upon the dependent living entities. We're all parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord. The living entities are predominated Brahma, whereas the Supreme Lord is the predominating absolute. As soon as we forget this clear fact, we are at once an illusion, and thus we are put into the threefold miseries, as one is put in a dense darkness. The clear consciousness of the cognizant living being is God consciousness, in which one bows down unto him in all circumstances. So we described 5 verses that were describing what the citizens of Dwarka were reacting to, and from here on out, I'm sure it's like the next couple of verses, the citizens of Dwarka, the Dwarka Vasis, are now praying towards the Lord. And the first thing they say is that the Lord is worshipped by all demigods, like Brahma, the 4 sanas, and the king of heaven. I was reading part of the 3rd canto a couple days ago, and I'm at the point about Brahma's prayers to the Lord. So the 9th chapter, where Brahma is praying to the Lord so that he can get intelligence to create, and he can be his devotee always. And Srila Prabhupada makes the point that Brahma is the most intelligent human and the most intelligent being in this entire universe. He's the most rich. He has the longest lifespan. We are not anything that can compare to him. And even he, the one who is much better than we are, is serving the Lord. And he is offering obeisances to the Lord. So we have no right to say that we shouldn't do that, because it's clear that even Brahma is going to do that. As Brahma is offering obeisances, Brahma is serving the Lord. If someone as great as a personality like Brahma is doing it, then we definitely should do it. So by saying that Krishna is worshipped by all the demigods, it also shows that us who don't have all that material success and material gains, even we should serve the Lord as well. And then continuing on, Prabhupada says that Krishna is the ultimate rest, or sorry, the citizens say it's in the translation, that these are the ultimate rest for those who are really aspiring to achieve the highest benefit of life. So Krishna is the shelter of those who are trying to achieve the highest benefit of life. There's 10 topics of the Bhagavatam. I believe the last one is Ashraya, shelter, the ultimate refuge. And even Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, I am the shelter of all living entities. And the ultimate goal is that the highest benefit of life is pure devotional service. And we would have to take shelter of him. And that's taking shelter of him is part of pure devotional service. Surrendering to him is also part of pure devotional service. And then Prabhupada describes that he is the supreme transcendental Lord, and time cannot exert his influence upon him. Or sorry, the citizens still say. And that starts to create the discussion about the differences between Krishna and us. Prabhupada makes this point a lot, that Krishna is never under time. Even when he's in the material world, physically within its boundaries, he's still above the modes of material nature and above material nature and Maya. However, that's not the case with us. That's the difference between the conditioned soul and Krishna, because the soul can get conditioned. We can come to this material world and become under the control of the material modes, and we can be controlled of time. However, Krishna is the controller of time and the controller of Maya. So it said here that the jivas are the predominated and Krishna is the predominator, that he's the one who presides over everything and we are being presided by. So that's the difference between us and Krishna. But when we forget that we are the servants of the Supreme Lord, we go into illusion. And when we forget that, and now that's when we start putting in our miseries. The word Bhavambuddho is mentioned twice in some of the famous verses. And And both times it's mentioned, I think that's the ocean of miseries, the material ocean of miseries. And both times it mentions the same solution for getting out of that ocean of miseries. The first one is in the Shikshashtakam, verse 5. Ainanda tanuja kinkaram patitam mam bishame babam buddho kripaya tava pada pankaja svaduli sadarsham vichintaya. Where Lord Chaitanya prays in the mood of a conditioned soul, "Oh, son of Nanda, oh Krishna, I was your servant, but then I fell into this horrible ocean of miseries, this babambudo. But you can be merciful. Please be merciful to me and offer me a speck of the roll of a speck of dust on your lotus feet." Essentially saying, please give me the shelter of your lotus feet. On the other time, it is said, is in the 10th canto, 14th chapter, 58th verse. Samashritaye padapallava plavam mahatpadam punya yashomurarir babambudir vatsa param padam yatvi padam natesham. Where it says that when we take shelter of this material world is awful, it's a place of misery. I don't think I have to go into detail about that, but there's a solution around it, and that solution is taking shelter of Krishna. It's described that the big, vast ocean of material miseries, when we take shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord, becomes like the water in the hoof print of a calf. So like, the calves can make a hoof print, it's like really thin, and then when it rains, there might be some water. And that little bit of water is what the material world, this huge ocean of material miseries, can be compared to. We have to do one thing. And what is that one thing? We have to take shelter of the transcendental lotus feet of the Lord. So when we take shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord, then all of our miseries go away. When we're in full Krishna consciousness and we're at his lotus feet, serving him all the time, that's when our miseries go away. I think that's a great place to end. Once again, thank you all for giving me this opportunity to speak. Vancha kalpaturabhyascha kripasindubhya evacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.
Jai Rahul Prabhu, Hare Krishna. Thank you
Haribo.
thank you so much for serving the Bhagavatam class. Extremely well said, well presented. I'll just open it up for questions or comments or anything like that. Does anybody have any comments or questions so far?
No questions, Prabhu, but just a comment that really nicely presented the class, as well as, thank you for bringing in so many references from the scriptures. And yeah, very well prepared. Thank you, Prabhu, for sharing.
Thank you for your kind words. Please continue to bless me. Hare Krishna.
I had one question, if I may. You brought up this point that if Krishna favors you, he takes things away. That's from Canto 10, Chapter 88, Text 8. Yasyaham anugrinami harishe tad dhanam shanay tato dhanam tyajantyasya swajana dukka dukkitam. That Krishna is saying, if I especially favor someone, I gradually deprive him of wealth, then his friends, tato dhanam tyajantyasya, if the friends and relatives, such a poverty, the friends and relatives of this person, they abandon this guy, and then he suffers one distress after another. So the argument that Krishna is God is all powerful, all benevolent, all kind. This verse kind of doesn't really support that. This is like what the conventional understanding of God is, that he's all kind. He's not a sadist, right? So how would you respond to this? That okay, you surrender to Krishna. What does he do? He takes away everything you have. How would you understand that?
Yeah. So the reason why, like, yes, like yes, Krishna does take anything away. It's seemingly not benevolent, but those possessions may make us stay in this material world for longer, and we may have a good position now, but there's no guarantee that's the same tomorrow or the day after that, or even like in a couple years, anytime. This material world is still like full of issues and full of problems. And even if we think we're going to be fine, we plan everything out. When we die, we don't know our next life. We could have committed lots of big sins and have to suffer all those sins in our next life. In Prabhupada's purport, I think it's Srimad Bhagavatam 10.14.8. The verse. I forget the Sanskrit of the verse, but it's common. Yeah, that verse, the purport says that sometimes Krishna will give suffering to his devotees, but it's not the same as karmic reactions, because karmic reactions are handled by Maya. She controls all the karmic reactions. However, when Krishna gives someone suffering, it's to increase the dependence on the reservoir of happiness, on Krishna, the reservoir of happiness, so that the devotee is not held back by anything. The devotee can quickly go to Krishna and go quickly to the reservoir of happiness, because yes, maybe Krishna is taking away material happiness, but he's replacing it with spiritual happiness, which is like, I think it's in the Bhikshu Gita, there's the Avanti Brahmana. He is initially like a miser, and then he starts losing everything, and people are like insulting him. His like family takes all his money away, and everything just goes really wrong for him. And then he realizes that that's actually that can happen at any time. Death is going to take all of it away. And the reason why that it doesn't matter is because Krishna is coming to him. The bigger opulence, the bigger portion is being provided. So, like while karma is a material reaction, Krishna may be giving punishment to like take away our attachments, take away our anarthas, and purify us fully so that we're ready to come back to him. So the answer to the question is yes, there's some material like loss, but number one, that material loss will be taken away from us regardless because of death. And that material possession will be taken away from us regardless of death. Number two, that material like thing is not temporary. It is the cause of our suffering, because after death we may have to take another body, and that would also cause a lot of suffering. And number three, by having no more material possessions, we can go to the actual cause of our happiness, which is Krishna himself. So yes, Krishna does take away all of those things, but that's because they're hurting us. Like we see a lot of times that especially in some situations of like drug overdose, that the person who's in this like situation doesn't want to get out of the situation. They don't think it's a problem. They're like, oh, I'm not being affected. There's like the show called like Intervention or something, where like the people are like, I'm not being affected. I'm just gonna go continue like abusing drugs. And at some point, someone has to say, you have to take this. You may not like it. You may not know what's good for you, but we do. And it's sort of the same thing with it's the same thing with Krishna, that we are addicted to all the material things in this world, but just like drugs, they're not good for us because they continue to keep us here and they continue to make us suffer. But Krishna knows what's good for us, and if he punishes us just so that we can get that, that's for our ultimate benefit. So he's thinking bigger picture, and he's seeing the full picture, and he's seeing what's actually good for us, not what will be good for us tomorrow or the next day. So that's why Krishna does that. I think that was a really long answer to like a simple point, but
no, that's a good answer about why he takes it away. But we're talking in hindsight and retrospect, but when we're actually in the situation of say worst case scenario, like a really close family member dies, like a sibling or a parent or somebody dies like unexpectedly, and you read this, that Krishna is taking it away. How do you keep going in devotional service, keep motivating yourself in devotional service in that way? Because you can easily say, if a sibling dies or a parent dies, you can easily, after reading that verse, you can say, okay, Krishna did this to me, so I should stop worshiping Krishna because he's actually the cause of this. So how would you like keep going in devotional service if you know that there's going to be material pains? There's going to be more material pains.
Well, like the material pains are going to happen either way. Like Kunti prays in her prayers that she wants more material calamities, and Prabhupada says you don't need to do this, because you don't have to do this because it's going to come either way. Regardless if you pray or you don't pray for calamities, they will come. So like it's a matter of time. Like we come here and we're destined to leave. So we will have those either way. But I think like in like a term of like knowing that someone close to you, a relative, has like left, you would think, hey, maybe Krishna did do this, but that's for their benefit as well. Because Krishna is not just the benefactor of the devotees, he's the benefactor of all. He knows what's best for everybody. So like if maybe like the situation is harder to think of when it's really, really bad. But knowing that, but having that faith in Krishna and having the association of devotees who will give you that faith, and having those things will be able to counsel you through that. Because you have to have that faith that Krishna is in charge, he's making the decisions, and he's your benefactor. And he's going to do exactly what's right for you. And if you have that conviction and faith, there's not a lot of things that can deter one from devotional service.
Yeah, developing that little faith and shraddha before I heard somewhere that you chant very nicely now, like when the waters calm, because you know the water's going to get turbulent at some point.
Yeah, I think that's like the saying, the more you sweat in peace, the less you bleed in war. So like the more
you sweat in peace, the less you bleed in war. Okay, nice.
Yeah, so like the more like you try it right now, when it's easier to like maybe forget Krishna because it's materially happy, the more you prioritize Krishna now, the easier it will be to like to cope with it when things are going wrong.
What if you find that you're not able to cope with it? That you're like we hear like it's almost become a cliche. You're not the body, you're the soul. But then when someone passes away, you're like crying and you're like distraught and you're feeling like so. But does that mean I have no realization, or is that just a natural effect of my blood relative of mine leaving?
That's a natural effect. I mean, like we all have like if like someone does leave, then we're all going to have those natural emotions. We're going to have those emotions. And if we don't have that faith, I would recommend to stay in the association of devotees a lot, because devotees will know exactly what they need to say in order for you to continue the path of devotional service, to counsel you. Okay, yeah. To counsel you properly and kind of how you can continue in the process of bhakti. I can't see you. 1 second. Okay, now I can see you. Yeah. So like, they know exactly what to say that it'll make it best for you to continue devotional service. They know how to console you, and yeah.
That makes more sense. Thank you, Rahul Prabhu, for serving the Bhagavatam.
Thank you so much.
I see no questions on YouTube or Zoom or anywhere. So we'll have you again, maybe next month to serve the Srimad Bhagavatam class, and we will just end with Vaishnav pranams.
Kalpatarubhyascha kripasindhubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha.
Ananta Koti Vaishnav.
Vaishnavim ki jai.
Krishna Rahul Prabhu ki